Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing a retrospective on one of my all-time favorite bands, Behemoth. So, the time has finally come to discuss this band on my channel. You know, they've got a new album coming out on the 16th of September called... Oh, I forgot the title. Yeah, that. Anyway, so just a quick history on Behemoth. Behemoth is a Polish extreme metal band that started out in the early 90s. They were initially a traditional black metal band before eventually transitioning into blackened death metal. I'm a huge fan of this band, not only because of Adam Nagal-Darski's amazing vocals, but just, for the musicianship in general. These guys are constantly pushing the envelope in the realm of black metal and just, extreme metal in general. Of course, a band like this couldn't have possibly come about without creating some controversy, mostly for their satanic, anti-Christian aesthetics. Nagal being put on trial multiple times just for tearing up a Bible back in 2007. Poland has very strict laws in place regarding blasphemy. If you were to tear up a Bible in Poland, you could serve up to 2 years in jail for just that, which is crazy, because it violates free speech. But the band has overcome that and so many other obstacles. To this date, they've released a total of 11 studio albums, with the 12th one coming soon. I'm not going to be looking at any of their demos and EPs or anything like that, because otherwise this video will take forever to make. And yeah, let's get started. So, Svent with Storming Near the Baltic is one of two albums that showcase the band at their roots. This is essentially a traditional raw black metal album. Think black metal bands like Mayhem, Watain, Warthrone, and so on. So it definitely wears its influences on its sleeve, but it still feels like its own distinct experience. The production quality is not the best for a traditional black metal album, but it only enhances the rawness of this particular album given how long ago it came out. Nagal's vocals comprise mostly of shrieks and screams compared to what you would hear on later albums. The album is also occasionally melodic due to the use of synthesizers, something they also used on a couple of their demos for like the interludes and stuff like that. It's part of a subgenre called dungeon synth, if I'm correct. And there's also a strong emphasis on acoustic guitars throughout the album. One thing that might bother some people when listening to this album for the first time is that it embraces the simplistic nature of traditional black metal quite a bit. But I didn't mind that at all, in fact I think it benefited from the simplicity. There's probably one or two songs in the second half that are just okay, but everything else is fantastic. My favorite track is Hidden in a Fog, and my least favorite track is Forgotten Cult of Alderaan. So overall, it's a great black metal album, but because I'm more into the blackened death metal side of things, this is one of my least favorite Behemoth albums. It's still great though, and I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. So, imagine if the band took everything from Svent and amplified it to another level. Well, that's exactly what they did with Grom. There is so much to like about this album. From the opening intro, the intro is one of my favorite intros in their entire discography, because they've done quite a few on some of their albums. It's got drumming and synths that loop for about a minute or so, and it never gets old. I have it stuck on repeat sometimes. Aside from just being a black metal album, it also takes some influences from Viking metal and even thrash metal. Keyboards are used, resulting in much heavier synths compared to Svent. There are female guest vocalists. The melodies are more bass driven. Admittedly, Nagal's vocals can be a bit cringy from time to time, but I was okay with it because I guess that's part of the album's charm. You know, when you look back on traditional black metal music nowadays, there are plenty of cringeworthy aspects. You know, the low budget music videos that most bands like to shoot in the forests, and just some bands trying way too hard to sound as edgy as the bands that inspired them. So yeah, there's that. And there are one or two songs here and there that are just okay, but most of the album is incredible. My favorite track is Lazy Pomosa, and my least favorite track is Rising Proudly Towards the Sky. So overall, this is definitely a step up from Svent, and this was the last album the band recorded before transitioning into a blackened death metal sound. So I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. So, Pandemonic Incantations is their first album to incorporate a blackened death metal sound. You know, gone are all the synthesizers and keyboards, the riffs are much heavier, the lead guitars are much more prominent. Nagal's vocals now comprise of deep shouting as opposed to shrieking from the previous albums. And production-wise, the sound quality is much better, and the album has a darker melodic edge to it, and on the whole, it's just a bit more experimental. From the opening intro, Diableria, you know you're in for something different, based on the drumming and the melodies and the chanting. The second to last track on the album is so cool because it deviates from pretty much everything else that came before it. So even if you don't enjoy the album, well, there's that song to look forward to. And fun fact, if you bought this on CD, you would have to wait all the way up to track number 66 because there's about 56 tracks of pure silence before you get to the outro. However, because this is the band's first attempt at this genre, their lack of musical sophistication is kind of on display here. You know, it's extremely repetitive. And there are one or two songs in the second half that are just okay. My favorite track is Chwala Mordecom Wachicha, and my least favorite track is Driven by the Five-Winged Star. So, overall, this is probably my least favorite Behemoth album, but I still really enjoyed it for what it was. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. So, after Pandemonic Incantations, Satanica was definitely a step in the right direction for Behemoth. And for so many reasons, you know, the guitar work is a lot more complex and technical, especially with the solos. The drumming is some of the fastest I've ever heard from this band. The girls' vocals aren't at their best here, but it's from here onwards that they're really beginning to sound a lot like they do on the majority of the band's discography. And on the whole, it's just a lot more diverse compared to Pandemonic Incantations. The band's first ever single, Decade of Therion, is featured as the album opener. And fun fact, this album features the first Behemoth song I ever listened to in the form of Starspawn. And there are two hidden tracks at the end of the album. One of them is called number 33 and it's kind of inspired by techno. And the second one is number 93, which is an outro that features deep demonic vocals from Nagal. There's only one track I didn't enjoy off this album, and that's Of Sephirotic Transformation and Carnality. But other than that, every other song is fantastic. My favorite track is Sermon to the Hypocrites, and my least favorite track is the aforementioned Of Sephirotic Transformation and Carnality. So, overall, this is definitely one of their better albums, even if it's not my absolute favorite, and I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. So, this brings us to Thalima 6. It's not quite as good as Satanica, but it's an album I didn't expect to enjoy as much as I did. Yes, there are those who consider it to be among Behemoth's weaker albums, and at one point I agreed with that, but the more I re-listened to the album, the more it kinda grew on me. Musically, it is more or less the same as Satanica, although there is some experimentation with the tempos and the guitar work, and they even brought back the synthesizers again without overusing them too much. Nagal's vocals were probably as ferocious as they could possibly be by that point. The album may come off as a bit too repetitious for some, but I didn't mind that at all, especially upon re-listens. That's really all I can say about this album, because there's really not much else to say about it other than it just being a continuation of what was accomplished on Satanica. There are one or two songs here and there that are kind of boring or simply redundant, but on the whole it's still pretty good. My favorite track is The Universe Illumination, and my least favorite track is Inauguration of Scorpio Dome. So overall, not their best work, but still an excellent blackened death metal album. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. So, Zoskia Cultus, Here and Beyond. This is unfortunately another one of my least favorite Behemoth albums. It's still excellent black and death metal, but it's not one I'd revisit often. Musically, the guitar riffs are a bit more down-tuned. The drumming is pretty much the same as the last two albums. There's a bit more variety compared to Thalima 6. There's a lot of fast songs, but there's a couple of down-tempo ones in there, like As Above, So Below. Try using that song to introduce this band to hip-hop fans. See how they react. There's two really cool interludes in the form of Hekau 718 and Fornicatus Benefictus, and the lyrics are reminiscent of ancient English. But the album as a whole just isn't as memorable as the majority of their other work, and there are one or two songs here and there that are okay, or they just kind of overstay their welcome. My favorite track is As Above, So Below, and my least favorite track is Horns of Baphomet. So overall, it's still a great extreme metal album, but it's not the best I've heard from Behemoth in my opinion. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10.